What's up YouTube, Cell Phone Spammer here, and I'm doing a card ruling update just before Nats. So let's start with looking at Chaos Dragons. A friend came up to me and he was asking me this question just in time for Nats, and it was, if I activate Charge the Light Brigade to add a level 4 or lower Light Swarm to my hand, and I mill my Eclipsed Wyvern, how will this resolve if my opponent tries to GD Crow my Wyvern? Well, this is the situation here. So if he activates Charge the Light Brigade, which is sending the top 3 cards of his deck to the grave and adding a level 4 or lower Light Swarm monster from his deck to his hand, and he mills the Wyvern, this is what's going to happen. Charge is going to resolve, and him adding his level 4 or lower target, if there is one, though Charge does not target. Then, after that is resolved, Eclipsed Wyvern will then activate on a separate chain as Chainlink 1, for its effect that if this card is sent to graveyard, banish one level 7 or higher light or dark dragon monster from your deck. So, the first part of it is that it's a mandatory effect. It will not miss timing for this. So it will activate on Chainlink 1. His opponent then will chain to the activation of Wyvern's effect through DD Crow. DD Crow during either player's turn can be discarded to target one card in your opponent's graveyard and banish that target. In this case, the target is going to be the Eclipsed Wyvern. How it's going to resolve is Crow will be Chainlink 2. Crow will resolve as Chainlink 2, therefore banishing Eclipsed Wyvern. Once Wyvern is banished, its mandatory effect will resolve in searching out and banishing a level 7 or higher dark or light dragon. The problem here is that now that Wyvern is no longer in the graveyard, its second ability, where it would add the card it banished, if banished from the graveyard, will no longer be in play because Wyvern is no longer in grave while its first effect has resolved. So to recap, Wyvern will not get the card if crowed on the activation of its first effect. Now, if Wyvern's first effect resolved and the Wyvern was still in grave, then the Crow is chained, it can then get its card back because Crow has banished the Wyvern after the first effect has been resolved. Just to let people know about this. Now, another issue with Chaos Dragons and Heroes is Light Pulsar Dragon and Elemental Hero, The Shining. A lot of people have misconceptions about what mistiming means. Now, the effect we are having problems with Light Pulsar is that when Light Pulsar is destroyed, when does its effect activate in order for it to special summon another monster? In this case, you can special summon this card from your graveyard by sending a light and dark monster from your hand to the graveyard. The effect we're looking at here is when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target a level 5 or higher dark dragon type monster in your graveyard and special summon it to the field, usually with Red MD or Red Dice Darkness Metal Dragon. With Shining has something similar, but rather than special summoning a monster, it will add monsters to hand. So when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target up to 2 of your banished Elemental Hero monsters and add those to your hand. Now, the thing people don't understand is if you destroy them by battle, they get their effect. They will not miss timing in the damage step. What their other misconception is if you activate Horn of the Phantom Beast on a monster that can be equipped with it, or if you activate, let's take an example of a Union monster. The Six Samurai armor card, Spirit of the Six Samurai. Its effect to draw is simultaneous to the destruction of either Shining or Light Pulsar. So what's going to happen is that since Light Pulsar's effect and Six Samurai's armor's effect, or Six Samurai's spirit's effect to draw one, will both activate simultaneously. So when you have simultaneous effects go on chain, or SEGOC, it will resolve as just going turn player is Chainlink 1, not turn player is Chainlink 2. Light Pulsar will special summon a monster, and then you will draw one. That's how it will work. Same with Shining. Shining will add 2 cards to hand, and then you draw one. Now, in order to get around this issue about mistiming, someone came up with the idea of Soul Taker. Soul Taker will destroy one face-up monster on that your opponent controls, then your opponent will gain 1,000 life points. Since these are both effects noted by no semicolon and no colon and the actual card text. What's going to happen is if Soul Taker will target either the Light Pulsar or Shining, they will be destroyed, but the last thing to happen would be Soul Taker's other part of the effect where it says, then your opponent gains 1,000 life points. That's where the mistiming happens, because the last thing to resolve is not the destruction of either Light Pulsar or Shining, but the gaining of 1,000 life points. It's just something that people have come up with, and Soul Taker is a really nice card to look into right now. So anyone who has that Red Eye Zombie structure deck, keep looking for those Soul Takers. Those are really good right now. Now let's move on to Effect Veiler. We all know that priority on ignition effects are gone, and trigger effects are still good. So with Effect Veiler, we want to go over some of the issues we've been having with it. Effect Veiler negates a whole effect. Veiler is not a skill drain. Veiler will follow a card where it goes, so where it activates and resolves. If the card activates on field, it resolves on field. So if you summon Rescue Rabbit and they Veiler you, your rabbit can still banish itself as a cost, but its effect will still be negated because its effect activated on the field and Veiler lingers on the rabbit. Now, as compared to something like Sangan, where Sangan would be sent to grave, so therefore activates in grave and resolves in grave, Veiler cannot negate that because its effect activated in the graveyard, not on the field. I just want to make this clear so that way we get some misunderstandings out of the way. This next ruling is actually from a friend of mine who judged last year's Nats, and he was just mind-struck about how many people cannot get this through their head, and it's with Gores. Gores just got reprinted. It laid it out completely on how his effects work. His effect is special summon himself, and his secondary effect based on how he special summoned himself. So the main issue we're having here is Gores cannot, I repeat, cannot be negated by a Solemn Judgment. Solemn Judgment negates spell cards, trap cards, normal summons, flip summons, and inherent special summons. In no way is Solemn Judgment negating effects of monsters. So you cannot negate a Gores with a Solemn Judgment. You can, however, negate Gores with a Solemn Warning. I just want to make that imperative now because it's going to save a lot of judges a lot of hassle here. And one more card I'd like to talk about before the end of this this webcast is Super Polymerization. The real issue we've been having with Super Poly is that you can use it under macro, and you can use it under D-Fissure. Okay? There's nothing that says on the card that it has to go to grave. It's just Super Poly. The issue with people is that, oh, if I have Macrocosmos out, you can't send anything to graveyard. The thing with Macrocosmos, macro only stops costs that go to graveyard. So, for example, Insectors. If you have a Hornet equipped to an Insector monster, you cannot send the Hornet to graveyard under a Macrocosmos as the cost. However, if we look at Super Poly's text over here, it says discard one card, semicolon. Right here, discarding one card, that is your cost. The send from either side of the field to the graveyard fusion material monsters that are listed on a fusion monster card, that is an effect. So therefore, yes, you can Super Poly under a macro or a D-Fissure. Don't argue with it, don't cry, don't bitch. It's just how it's going to go. So don't think that macro is going to solve all your problems. It's just a decent card to stop costs. I'd like to thank you everyone for watching this cast, and I hope this has been informative to anyone who's going to Nationals at the end of the month, and just for any general player information. So without further ado, later YouTube.